Can you be free? The wounds that are inside you, the lies that you've believed, the oppression that seems to dog you everywhere you go, depression, anxiety, can you be free? Can you genuinely be healed of that and live a free life? And more than that, can you live a supernatural life? Is that a good question? Then stay tuned. We're going to give you those answers on this episode of the R3 podcast. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the R3 podcast. I'm Shane with Operation Restored Warrior and Encounter Online, and this is a supernatural episode. So you're going to have to buckle up. Let me tell you very specifically what you're going to get out of today's episode, because I'm guessing you're going to need it. First of all, that question that I asked. I don't know you and I don't know your life situations, but I happen to be a human. And as such, I know what is universal. We say this at Operation Restored Warrior all the time. You don't get through this life without taking some hits. And so I know that your heart, your spiritual heart, I'm not talking about your physical one, but your spiritual heart has sustained some wounds. You've grown up under flawed parents, and that could be a source of wounds. It could be crippling wounds, abuse, neglect, or just normal wounds that you get from having imperfect parents. You've been in relationships with people your whole life. You've had friends. You've had maybe spouses. And with those relationships come wounds. You've had aspirations. You've had dreams. And maybe those haven't worked out the way you thought. Maybe your career has fallen. Maybe you've had financial issues. All the things that we encounter in a normal life have the capacity to wound our hearts. Does any of that ring true for you? Do you feel like you might have a wounded heart? And with that, fears, anxiety, maybe even depression, maybe even suicide ideation. Can you be free of that? Can you be healed of that? Not like, can you cope? Can you motor through? Can you just be delivered of it? You can. I happen to know because it's happened for me. I know lots of people it's happened for, and I can show you how. So in this episode, two things we're going to focus on. We have talked a lot about something called the drop zone. It is a process that ORW founder Paul Lavelle pioneered, I believe, hand in hand with the ultimate healer, Jesus, since 2008. And this program, the Drop Zone program, in case you haven't heard of it, is something that he designed for our nation's warriors, military, first responders, active duty, veterans, that sort of thing, people who suffer from PTSD, who have seen a lot. But as he has gone through this process with them, he's discovered that often it's not the first responder, the combat situations that have caused the worst wounds. Sometimes it's just daily life. Sometimes it's relationship. Most often it's parenting and childhood wounds. But he developed this process called a drop zone. And it's a process by which people receive absolute healing from PTSD. Not medication, not coping skills, but complete healing from PTSD and suicide ideation. And that is available to you. Whether you're a soldier, whether you're military, first responder, a college professor, a business person, a stay-at-home mom, a coach, it doesn't matter. It's available to you now. So today in this episode, we're going to take a behind-the-scenes look at the drop zone. You'll get to see a little bit of what it's like and be able to consider, like, what would it be like for me to experience something like that? Because you can. Now, along the way, we're going to look at a second thing, and that's just supernatural life. See, I've been a follower of Jesus forever, and for 20 years or so. Let's start to go into a little bit about me. I became a follower of Jesus probably 24 years ago, and almost immediately started serving in churches. I felt called to ministry. I've been working in churches ranging from 75 people to 25,000 people, mostly in creative arts and that sort of thing. And it's just been an incredible blessing to me. I've also been a filmmaker. I've done a couple of feature films. You can look me up on IMDb, lots and lots of television shows. I'm not famous. You've never heard of me, but the Lord has blessed me with a career as a filmmaker and a television writer and director that's fed all of my 11 kids. No, I didn't stutter there. I really do have 11 kids. So it's been an incredible journey. And along the way, I mean, basically from my childhood, I've also taken some hits. I've had some wounds. I wouldn't say that I've struggled my whole life with PTSD, but man, I feel like I've had some crushing setbacks in my professional life, in my ministry life. I've been through a divorce. Need I say more? I mean, there have been some real wounds that I've carried that have affected my daily life. And throughout this whole journey, I believed in Jesus. I followed Jesus really passionately, but I didn't see any miracles. And actually, I didn't expect to, because I had been taught that all that miracle stuff, that kind of faded out at the end of the book of Acts. And now we have settled down into a nice, predictable, rational faith where we follow the Bible and we wait for Jesus to come back, or we wait to join him in heaven. And I was good with that. Except sometimes I would just get this nagging sense of, man, isn't there more than this? I don't know, have you ever felt that? Whether you're a believer in Jesus or not, I'm guessing you've looked out over your life, over existence, and gone, man, is this all there is? There's got to be more. C.S. Lewis, who was the author of the Chronicles of Narnia, and you may know him well, but you may not know he was also a great theologian, said that we are not created with longings for which no fulfillment exists. You know, we crave love, we can have love. We crave, when we're a baby, we crave shelter and food. We can have those things in the comfort of a mother. We crave beauty, and there's beauty in the world. There's, like, you think about it, there's not one craving that we have for which there's not a fulfillment, except this one. And what is it? Something more than this. And all human beings feel it. And even in church, worshiping God, feeling like I am headed for an eternity in his presence of unspeakable bliss and fulfillment. Here, now, I would go, man, is this all there is? Not to be ungrateful for all the blessings I'd been given, but there was just this desire for more. And I don't feel that anymore, other than I want more of the more that I found. And that is just a supernatural existence with Jesus. I mean, there's a reason why superhero films and fantasy films are so popular, because they speak to that inner desire in which we know in our hearts, there's more than this. There's more than this normal physical life. There should be more. And we all feel that, and we make stories about it that are captivating. But along in today's episode, I'm going to show you how I discovered that for myself. All right. So in my journey, let's go. Enough of a preamble. I've rattled long enough. So let's go. So along my journey as a filmmaker, I've been working for a Christian television network called TBN. And I don't know if you follow Christian music at all, you have heard of a band called Big Daddy Weave. It's a great Christian band. And I was assigned the task by the network of going on tour with Big Daddy Weave and creating a reality TV show with them, which I did. It was super fun, great guys. And when I met them, I was working with them to try to figure out, okay, what are the different episodes? What would they focus on? And they were really passionate about this organization called Operation Restored Warrior that I'd never heard of. And then so Mike Weaver, beautiful Mike Weaver, is a guy of such passion, and I'm not going to do a great impression of him, but he has a childlike enthusiasm. He's like, "Oh, dude, you're not going to believe this," and I didn't. As he laid out this story to me of how they met with the ORW founder Paul Lavelle. As Mike told me this story about Jay, his brother, who's another part of Big Daddy Weave, he was really struggling with really complicated health problems. And he ended up losing both of his feet and almost his life. And because of that, he entered into a really deep depression. And that went on for quite some time when Mike got a call from Paul Lavelle from Operation Restored Warrior, who said, not having seen them in a while, hey, I believe some friends of mine and I were praying, and I believe that Jay is fighting with the spirit of suicide right now. I'm like, what would you think if somebody gave you a call and said, hey, God just told me that so-and-so is wrestling with suicide? I mean, that sort of thing didn't happen in my normal, ordered Christian existence. But these guys were sold on this story, and they said that they came in, they confronted Jay, and Jay actually had a gun nearby and was making plans to that very night take his own life. And at the very least, I was intrigued. I was not necessarily entirely bought in. There had to be an explanation. There had to be more to the story. Sometimes these things grow in your mind over time, but I was intrigued. And so with the guys at Big Daddy Weaved, we decided to do an episode on the entire band going through a drop zone experience. And that's where I met Paul Lavelle and the Operation Restored Warrior team. I'm going to show you a clip for that episode right now. Enjoy.
Hey, Mike. How are you, buddy? Paulie. So good.
Pulling up and seeing these mountains and the guys coming out to greet us, it's like, wow, we're here. We're doing this. I'm walking in. I'm ready to go.
My brother of a different mother, J-Dog.
How are you, Bill?
How you guys doing? Good. Hey, guys. Hey, what's going on?
How are you?
All right.
So we show up and we see Paul and his guys in this just picturesque, backdrop. I'm just thinking, dude, I hope the other guys are as blessed by this experience as Jay and I were.
It's challenging when you come to something like this that was so meaningful to somebody you're close to, and they want you to experience just as much as they did. And maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't really know if all of us will, or maybe we...
So good to have you here. How was your trip?
Good.
Pretty good? Uneventful. What do you think of this place?
This place is beautiful.
Not bad.
So I don't know what to expect from this time. I know that I don't always handle stress well. I know it affects me physically, it affects me emotionally, it affects my family, it affects the people around me. And so I think, man, I'm just hoping that, maybe that's something that the Lord can deal with me in this process.
Hey, these guys have been through the program with us already, and I'm really looking forward to having you guys join us these next few days. So what I'd like to do is, these are my guys, part of the team. We'll do introductions inside. So if you'll follow us, we'll head in. So good to have you.
And getting to see these guys, I think it's going to be really exciting what's going to happen. They look like some warriors, and they look like they've been through some things, and yeah, I'm pretty excited about what's about to happen.
My position is in Operation Restore Warrior. I do all the processing, the phone calls, the gathering of the overview of the person's story, and once they arrive here, then I just become another member of the team as a facilitator. I retired as a first sergeant in the Marine Corps in November 30th of 2010. And at that point in time, what little did I know was ahead of me was not to be a good transition at all for me after retiring and into the civilian world. But I was to the point where I just didn't want to live anymore. I just didn't. And but what I know now is to be the grace of God. I found Operation Restored Warrior, and I got in. So excuse me. And it changed my life.
For me, I was a 240 gunner. I don't think you can really prepare yourself for what you're going to experience going through, even though I felt like I joined later. I was 28 when I joined. It can kind of take its toll on you, and so I think the way that you are taught to deal with it is just to suppress it, ignore it, push it down. Problem is you can only do that for so long till eventually it starts working its way out in other areas. And so I was just totally disconnected from my wife. I was just emotionally dead. A guy that I served with in Afghanistan actually told me about ORW. I was like, hey man, can I go to this thing? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. So he got me going. So that was, I think May or June of 2012 that I came through a drop zone. And he set me free in ways that I couldn't get out of myself. Didn't matter how much counseling, how much medication, that doesn't just make it go away. You know, but Jesus had to come in and heal those places, and he did.
Welcome back. So I'm sure you could tell just from that short clip that this was an incredibly powerful, meaningful, transforming experience for the guys at Big Daddy Weave. We didn't get too deep into the actual struggles that they brought to the table. We're going to get into more of that in a minute. So stay there. Stay with me. There's more to be revealed. But that's where I met Paul Lavelle for the very first time. And I love that guy from the first time I met him. And we had a conversation as we were wrapping up the shoot where I was like, so you hear from Jesus? And he told me that he does. He described his relationship with Jesus as being conversational. And I'd always heard that, no, it's not about religion, it's about a relationship. But at the same time, I was like, part of my longing of like, is this it? Is this all there is? Was the reality that my relationship with Jesus was the only relationship in my life in which this person didn't speak to me. Like everybody else that I have relationships with, we have a conversation. So I was intrigued by this, but still skeptical. But Paul told me, you can hear from Jesus too. I was like, oh, I don't know. Nobody's ever told me that I could. And he's like, no, you already do. You hear from Jesus all the time. And I told him, no, actually, I'm with me all the time. And I happen to know that I haven't been hearing from Jesus. To which he just laughed and challenged me to go out, see, and challenged me to ask Jesus, are you speaking to me? What do you have to say? And I did right there on the mountain. I went out and I just said, Jesus, I don't want to appear ungrateful, but if you've got more for me, I want it. I really want it. And I'd love to hear from you. And that moment, I heard something from Jesus and I was like, did I just make that up? Is that from Jesus? It was actually a creative idea. And it's crazy that he would speak to me as a creative. And then later it made sense because he's the ultimate creator. The first thing he ever did was to create. And so when we create, we're behaving in his image, which is how he made us. But all of that I hadn't really processed. And I ran back to Paul and was like, could Jesus have given me like a creative idea? He's like, yeah, that happens all the time. So we talked about it a little bit. And what happened was I developed a friendship with Paul, like a good friendship that lasted many months. And anytime I would give him a call, it got to where I was looking for reasons to give him a call, because anytime I would give him a call, we would talk for an hour and he would just be mentoring me. He's so generous and knows really this sort of supernatural life that I had been longing for so well, and is so encouraging and practical in inviting me into it. I really became addicted to hearing from Paul and did my best to put things into practice. But here's the next chapter. The network assigned me a project, a documentary series called Kingdom Life. And this was to be a 5-hour-long episode exploration of what is the Holy Spirit doing today? We've read about him in the book of Acts, but what about now? What about today? Is he still active? Is he still on the job? Do miracles still happen? Can we still have, like Paul would say, a conversational relationship? Can we hear from him? And I approached this project with a little more optimism than I would have before Paul Lavelle. I still hadn't seen anything that I would say was a miracle by that point, but I was really open. And the first episode of this 5-hour documentary series was to be about the prophetic. And in case you don't know a lot about that, and maybe you're like I was, when you hear the word prophetic, after you go, okay, I guess that's something that they talk about in the Bible. But isn't that also kind of like Nostradamus? No, the prophetic now, today, after the coming of Jesus and after he gave us this incredible gift of his presence in us through the Holy Spirit, the prophetic is just what Paul was talking about. It's just hearing from God. It's a conversational relationship with Holy Spirit. And I've talked about how in drop zones, there's this incredible spiritual healing, a heart healing. There's the removal of these very real wounds, although a doctor's examination wouldn't find them, but these crippling wounds that we all take as we go through this life. I hadn't seen as much of that in the Big Daddy Weave episode, but I had seen something that was just fascinating. It's like both Paul and all these guys on the team seem to have this conversational relationship with Jesus through the Holy Spirit. They hear, and that's prophecy. And so for the very first episode of this 5-hour documentary series on what's the Holy Spirit doing right now, I picked to do a segment on Operation Restored Warrior, especially the fact that they seem to, everything that they do seems to be driven by this conversational interchange that they're having through the Holy Spirit. So I'm going to play this entire segment for you, and this is where you're really going to get a behind-the-scenes look at a drop zone. This is not Big Daddy Weave. This is not a reality TV show. These aren't musical artists. These are actual veterans, active duty military. These are guys with serious heart wounds, PTSD, some of whom have attempted suicide, still struggle with suicide ideation. This is the real deal. And I want you to see what a drop zone sort of looks like. There's more that I'm going to share with you after you watch this clip. More behind the scenes, more miraculous, more supernatural, but check this out. So I'm headed into the mountains outside Vail, Colorado to visit some folks who might be doing just that. Few people know it, but our nation is facing a crisis right now of PTSD and suicide in our veterans and active duty military personnel. But there's a group called Operation Restored Warrior that's bringing miraculous emotional and spiritual healing to soldiers who literally have no hope left. I've been here before, working on a different TV series, and I was blown away with how they're able to bring dynamic healing over just a few days' time. And I now suspect that prophecy might be the secret of their success. If that's true, then ORW founder Paul Lavelle and his team are an amazing picture of taking the gift of prophecy outside the four walls of the church and changing lives.
Good to see you.
It's great to see you again.
Welcome back.
Oh man, I'd forgotten how beautiful it is.
Isn't it amazing?
What do we have going on? Who do we have here?
Well, we got 6 veterans here, and they're kind of desperate to get some restoration.
What are you guys doing now?
Well, we're getting ready to have breakfast, so we'd love you to come in.
Great time,
yeah,
man.
let's do it.
For many soldiers who've been crippled by PTSD, this ORW drop zone experience is their last shot at life. I know that at least one of the men here has already attempted suicide. The drop zone for these men begins with learning about the concept of heart wounds, the fact that traumatic experiences often leave an emotional injury that then influences our behavior and our way of seeing the world for the rest of our lives. Bringing healing to these wounds is a very personal process, but one of these soldiers has agreed to let us film his journey. John is a Coast Guard officer suffering from PTSD from a lot of these wounding incidents in his life and his military service. It's had a huge impact on his marriage and his relationship with his kids, and his wife is actually the one who's been pushing for him to receive healing at ORW. I caught up with John via Zoom a few weeks before the drop zone.
You know, the hardest part is that my wife doesn't know what happened to me. She doesn't understand the things that I deal with. So when we have disagreements, when we have issues, it just creates an environment to where I can't explain who I fully am yet. And I can just see the hurt and the pain. The things that I've seen and that I've had to deal with throughout my time in the Coast Guard, especially with my parenting. They have no idea why, why is dad so over the top about everything? And this has definitely caused issues as well within our marriage. For 25 years, I couldn't explain to her why.
The team members listen to each man's entire life story. It's a long and emotional process, and it may seem a little excessive, but they say that it's there that Holy Spirit begins to reveal the heart wounds that they're going to need to address.
I think when I was in 5th or 6th grade, the guy moved in down the street, older guy, rode motorcycles the whole bit, and I was drawn to that, and I guess my parents had no issue with me hanging out. So from about 5th or 6th grade till I got out of high school, probably my junior year, I was sexually assaulted and abused by him. Yeah.
So what we do is we sit down with these warriors, we hear their story, we develop the core memories, and Jesus actually uses us to go back to those core memories to reveal the truth of his presence. John rescued a young boy who was deceased.
I remember swimming and praying that it was trash. And seeing this lifeless child.
The Holy Spirit places me in a position of being a spectator in the story. I can see the water, it was cold, and I can see the helicopter, I can hear it, and I'm almost there.
And I remember feeling guilty. I didn't get there in time.
So after hearing these guys' stories, the team from ORW go off and basically seek the will of the Holy Spirit. Like, how are they supposed to speak healing into the lives of these guys? So why do they need to know about abuse John experienced when he was just a kid?
Jesus has showed it to me as like, do you remember the old Christmas tree lights? Remember the old ones, and if one light bulb went out, right? And then
I still use those.
Yeah, right. So you plug them in, and like, oh, now they're out. So now what I got to do? And you've got to go through each one. And Jesus showed me that these core memories that happen throughout their childhood, and there can be several of them. And it's like these light bulbs that were meant to be on, they go out. And so now throughout their life, if you picture it as a string of Christmas lights, they're not lit. But these wounds where the lights went out has affected from that young age all the way to the time that we start listening to their story. And what the Holy Spirit does is come in and speaks to us to illuminate where those core memories are. And so when we go in, it's kind of like we address those, and it's like that bulb gets taken out and a new one gets put in, and as soon as that does, that entire string lights up.
So we're kind of listening to the Holy Spirit as they're sharing their story. Because oftentimes, especially guys, we minimize trauma. So, it wasn't that bad. It was no big deal. It didn't really affect me. But as you listen to their whole progression of their story, you're like, oh my gosh. When that message came that you've got to protect yourself, that led you to lift weights. That led you to drive to start fights to prove that led you to the military to prove that I'm a bad person you don't want to mess with, And so but it came from way back in here. And so you can definitely see it over the long haul.
The Lord revealed stuff to these guys that I didn't even speak about, but that was so deep within me. That was something that maybe I didn't even realize how deep the scars were. And they were able to go even deeper, to clean that wound out, to expose everything. So there was nothing left hidden.
How is Jesus revealing the truth of his presence there?
I feel like he was behind me, holding my arms. Keeping me afloat, keeping him afloat.
And I know in that particular memory, Jesus came up in the boat with his additional team members. And I simply said, why don't you go ahead and hand that young boy to Jesus and watch what happens. And as John hands the boy to Jesus, Jesus breathes life into the boy and says, I'll take it from here. And so for John, he's walked around with, this is my responsibility. I should take fault in this. But in that moment, Jesus reveals the truth of the entire situation by going, I got him. I'll take it from here. You don't have to carry this anymore.
I've never experienced a freedom or a cleansing, if you will, to that degree, to that level.
What's the truth that Jesus speaks over you?
That I'm good, That
Amen. Yes, you are.
that I'm free.
Yeah. That's good.
That I'm loved.
Yeah. Come on.
What are you taking back home with you?
Man, I'm taking a lot. You know, I'm taking a blessing that God wanted me to have all along. That you know, I'm taking stuff back that I'm excited to share with my family that I've never shared. I think I'm going back with such a profound sense of power of the Lord that I just can't wait to get back to share it.
This drop zone contained revelations from the Holy Spirit, ended with multiple baptisms.
Yeah.
Is this a typical experience?
It is. It absolutely is. I think it's what makes ORW so unique, is that lots of organizations help, but through the Holy Spirit, we heal.
And you hear from the Holy Spirit that specifically all the time?
When I'm at a drop zone, I do. We don't know their stories until they get here. And so we have to rely on the Holy Spirit. And these guys are, you know, they're hurting, bad guys. I mean, this is like, for many of them, this is the last stop. And if this doesn't work for them, then they're done. So a little pressure there, but we do know that the Holy Spirit will show up. And I think our job, Shane, is that we are supposed to believe. And I think, you know, take the risk, step out, because I don't believe Jesus will ever leave you hanging. That's been my experience, and it's helped a few thousand warriors get their hearts restored and get their families back together.
Man, I still enjoy, even after all that I've done with Operation Restored Warrior over the years, I still enjoy watching that clip, because as I'm kind of revealing this to the viewer, it's being revealed to me as well. It's such an incredible time of discovery. And I hope it was meaningful to you, specifically what John shared. But I just want to let you know there's so much more to it than that. I mean, if you have a bunch of active duty military guys with genuine PTSD, people who are struggling, maybe even suicide ideation, and some cameras show up, they're not going to say, yeah, film my story. So as revealing as I hope what I just shared with you is, there's so much more that I was not able to film, not able to share. And let's just focus on John. You have, if you've been following the R3 podcast at all, you've heard John's story. The way Jesus showed up in these traumatic experiences in his childhood of abuse, in his military career, of just traumatic situations, and brought total healing. And you've heard John on the R3 podcast, and you know John's a free man. John is healed and joyful and full of purpose and life. This really worked. I mean, he is a living example of somebody who had crippling heart wounds, had them totally removed, and is now free of them and living a purposeful life. There you go. It's a miracle. It's supernatural. And I want to take a brief side road to say, if you go, man, I wish that could be me, it can. The whole reason that I'm talking to you right now, the whole reason there's an R3 podcast, really the whole reason Operation Restored Warrior exists, is to bring that to you specifically. And it doesn't matter whether you're military, first responder, or a soccer mom, or a teacher, or it doesn't matter. It is now being made available to you. The same program that can bring healing to John that you just saw, that can bring the miraculous that I hope you've already witnessed, is available to you. There's a couple of ways you can do that. First of all, you can go to the website, www.operationrestoredwarrior.org, and you can sign up for ORW programs. Additionally, if you don't want to wait, you can start the ORW Drop Zone online program now. It's free. It's the same program taught by the same guys in which the same Jesus will show up for you. He always does. So I want you to check those things out and also continue to listen to the R3 podcast and watch the website because we are beginning large venue events. We've got one coming up in February in Bisco, North Carolina, and there's several others that are going to be landing in 2025. And that is a great way for you to jump in and experience this healing and transformation for yourself. It's the whole reason we're doing this. So here's the kicker of the miraculous. Kingdom Life changed everything for me. In the course of that series, I actually saw the miraculous with my own eyes, both at ORW and all over the place. So here's the kicker. I have a little bit more to reveal about the behind the scenes of the Drop Zone program and about supernatural living. For me, Kingdom Life changed everything. It was an incredible transforming experience for me because I saw the miraculous. That's something more that I was talking about earlier, that we all have that longing. It was fulfilled. I just want more of it now. Like the incredible supernatural fantasies and superhero things that we watch for entertainment to sort of feed that desire in us. I found it and it's real and you can find it too. I saw miracles. I began to hear for myself from Holy Spirit. I began to learn how to develop this sort of conversational reality relationship that I had so long desired. And if you remember in that Kingdom Life clip that we just watched, that conversation with Paul, where he just talks about hearing from Holy Spirit, that really continued to fuel me. And I just got involved with Operation Restored Warrior. Now I'm on the team, and Paul has been a spiritual father to me, continuing to mentor me. And I see the miraculous in ORW all the time. Let me give you a little bit more behind the scenes on the miraculous of what happens around a drop zone. So when there's a drop zone event, this is something I didn't address in the clip that you just watched. There are a number of folks who are coming in, and we don't share those identities with the team. We just share a first name, and we ask our team, our drop zone facilitators, and we have a prayer team. And we ask our team to go to Jesus and ask, what do we need to know about these guys? There's some structure around it, but there are a series of questions that we ask about, like, who are these guys? What are they struggling with? This is not stuff you can get online and Google or like creep their Facebook page and learn. They're asking deep questions that only Jesus and these guys know about. What are the wounds that they're experiencing? What has happened to them in their life? And Jesus answers those questions to the team. And so when they show up at a drop zone, they've already received supernatural insight as to what each person at the drop zone is struggling with. And over again, it's just right. As they go through the journey of the drop zone with these people, it's revealed. And these, they call them advance words, guide these spiritual warriors as they set these people free. And I also get to hear on the back end, after each drop zone, there's something called a victory call. We're very, very respectful of confidentiality. So we never get beyond a first name basis with these folks. But the team will come back and share with us how those advanced words proved to be true and the stories of miraculous deliverance and healing. Now, those stories of healing are for those heart wounds, yes, of course, but it doesn't stop there. There are very frequently miraculous physical healings as well. It happens all the time, and I'll share that with you as I wrap things up in this episode by sharing my drop zone experience. So yeah, I've been involved with ORW for a long time. You might have guessed, not a soldier. I'm a creative, a filmmaker. But at some point, Paul said, dude, you got to do a drop zone. And I was hesitant, first of all, because I'm not a soldier. I didn't think I was a warrior at that point. And I thought, man, there are people who need this more than me. I've seen that with my own eyes. Yeah, I've taken some hits in my life, but I'm doing okay. But they insisted and I attended, and I'm really glad I did. I met a number of guys. I'm just going to name a couple of them by their first name. One of them is Jimmy. He is a Navy SEAL and a really cool, charismatic guy. I hope we'll have him on an R3 podcast in the future. But man, this guy was tightly wrapped. He was like just fidgety and like he was really, like, this dude is built, but he was like really compressed as if he was trying to hold himself in. And I discovered after a couple of days spent around Jimmy that he had like this guy had been beaten just through a long military career. There's a lot of aches and pains and wounds, but especially he had a shoulder injury and he had to hold his whole torso so tight just to immobilize this pain that was just ongoing and constant, and there was nothing that he could do about it. I also met a guy named Heath. He was actually my roommate while I was at ORW, and this man had been through more tragedy than really I'd ever heard of. More personal losses, lost so many family members, ultimately lost his wife and his unborn son. So many, it's an incredibly painful, complicated story, really of woe and outrageous misfortune. And this guy was broken. I mean, he couldn't sleep. He attempted suicide a couple of times. We would talk at the night until I fell asleep and he'd still be awake in the morning. I mean, it was just unbelievable. But here, those were just two of the guys that I was at a drop zone with. And as we went through the drop zone experience, we got to know each other. We got to be close. One thing I don't know how to represent to you in words is just the heaviness and the darkness and the despair that was all over these guys in a way that was visible, almost like they were clothed in it. It was just heartbreaking. And I don't even know how to paint that picture, but there comes a point in the drop zone experience you saw in this clip that that I just shared with you, where John went through what's called the healing prayer. And I'm not going to talk a lot about what the healing prayer is. I don't want to say that it's the proprietary secret sauce, but I just don't want to spoil it for you, because I believe that you are going to have your time in the healing prayer. That's my hope. That's my prayer. But as we went into the healing prayer, even though I filmed it a couple of times, I thought I knew what to expect. I didn't have any way to be prepared for it. And I'll just tell you how the supernatural kicked off for me in the healing prayer. You heard in that clip that I shared with you that really the thing that heals these wounds is that Jesus shows up. He actually shows up in these events, these painful events. And so I had shared with these guys a number of painful events in my life, and we were going back and we were revisiting them. And they said in the midst of this event, it was, I'll just say it was my parents having a huge fight, and I was a little child. And I was just hearing this fight from the other room, laying in bed late at night. And I heard one of the guys say, I was like in that memory, my eyes were closed. I heard one of the guys say, "Who else is there with you?" And in my mind's eye, I looked around and there was no one else was there. And they said, "Are you sure no one else is there?" And I knew what the answer was supposed to be because I was so familiar with the program, but I wasn't experiencing anyone else present. And one of the facilitators who was with me said, "Look out the doorway by the bookshelf in the hallway." And he described a couple of other little details of exactly what I was looking at, of the room that I was in as I believe, a third grade child. And I looked exactly where he talked about looking, and Jesus was present. Jesus came into that memory. And I'm not going to share any of the rest of it. I will just say that I had an encounter with Jesus throughout that healing prayer that that at the time I didn't even have a place for in my theology. And that's what I experienced. Those wounds that I brought in were healed. They're still healed to this day. Not saying I don't continue to take hits and need more healing. We all do, and we always will. But I received the exact same thing I'm telling you that you can have. But here's the big deal. Remember Jimmy, the Navy SEAL, so much trauma from his military career, but also he tells the story of the way he was so clenched up to protect his shoulder. I saw him. I knew that was the case. When he went into the healing prayer, I knew that was the condition he was in. So when he came out and he was like, I knew that he had been miraculously healed. And he shared the fact that in his healing prayer, one of the guys said, hey, you're really experiencing pain in your shoulder right now, aren't you? Yeah. I feel like Jesus wants to heal that. Put out his hand, put it on his shoulder, and heal him. I still know Jimmy today. I consider him a good friend of mine. It's still healed, as are all of the wounds, all of the baggage that he experienced that drove him to try to hang himself in a mental institution. He's free. He's healed. Heath, the guy who was really just a ghost of a man, came out smiling and weeping and is still to this day just so full of life and joy. I mean, the miraculous happens, and it can happen in your life. It happens at these crazy events called the drop zone. So I hope in this episode I've whetted your appetite and made you hungry for the things that really, honestly, you're already hungry for. You're already hungry for the supernatural. Whether you're aware of it, you have this desire like I had, where I was just like, man, there's got to be more than this. Or whether you're just a junkie for TV shows and video games and all of this counterfeit life that comes in to try to salve the pain of this ache inside of us, where we know that we were made for more than what we're experiencing. The miraculous is available to you. And also, I hope I've whetted your appetite for freedom, for healing. Because if you are hurting, if you are struggling, and I know just like by statistical average, you probably are. Most of the people who are watching this have some sort of a gaping, open, painful, festering wound in their life that is defining their daily reality. You don't have to live like that. You don't. You can be healed and free. So again, right there on your screen is the website, www.operationrestoredwarrior.org. You can go there. You can get into these programs. You can begin your journey online right now. You can go from here to there and be in the journey 5 minutes. It doesn't cost you anything. And it can give you everything. So there you go. A very personally revealing for me episode of the R3 podcast. Hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you're ready to take a step. And I hope we'll see you next time.